Welcome to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast. Many thanks for joining us on the Journal of Biophilic Design today. We're joined by Jeremy Myerson, who is a design writer and Professor Emeritus in the Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design at the Royal College of Art. He recently co-wrote a book with futurist Philip Ross called Unworking, which we're going to be reviewing, and is published in the issue 16 of the Journal of Biophilic Design, which is Biophilic Sound. I don't know if you can see that in the video, but I'm holding a copy of the book up, which I don't think you can. Yes, you can. You can see it now. It's a beautiful hardback copy. It's the reinvention of the modern office, and he does talk about biophilic design in there, which I'm glad to see, and also the future of it. So he also, with Philip, he is co-founder of the WorkTech conference, which some of you might know, an academy, which is an online knowledge platform and network for the future of work and workplace. He's co-founder with Mark Sansom of Healthy City Design, which incidentally some listeners might be interested to learn, launched the 2025 Healthy City Design Awards, which is still taking entries until the 4th of September. So I'll put a link to that in the spiel that goes with the podcast. But in our conversation today, we're going to be mainly focusing on the workplace, past, present, and also looking in the future too, and also how biophilic design and biophilia fits in with all of that. So I'm really glad with all your busy life, Jeremy, that you've managed to spare time and join us today. So thanks very much.
Well, great to be here, and biophilia is a very big part of the future of work.
Excellent. We like to hear that. We're going to be quoting you on that to the nth degree. Can you tell us, first of all, a little bit about yourself and what got you interested in design theory and research, please?
Well, I'm a journalist and an editor and a researcher, and I've been thinking about design and sustainability and the environment and how we work and all of these things for a very long time. My background is very much, I did an arts degree, I went into journalism, I ended up on Design magazine, which was published then by the Design Council. I met most of the great designers of the day. I then launched a magazine called Design Week, which is still running. It was launched in 1986, so it has its 40th anniversary next year. This is a magazine, a weekly magazine originally, hence the title, but now it's an online platform for designers and their clients. And I was very, very interested in how design and designers could influence society and create a better environment. And I subsequently went to the Royal College of Art and studied design and became a researcher. And so I slowly, over a period of time, morphed from journalism into academia. A bit of a two-way process, a bit like you, Vanessa. I've always been interested in these subjects, and the workplace is particularly interesting because I think it's a kind of nexus for talking about a lot of these trends and ideas. And what's happened recently is that work has changed enormously. Where we work, how we work, the technologies we use, the environments that we want to be in. So from my perspective, workplace is a great platform for thinking more broadly about design and society.
Yeah. I think it makes a really good point there, actually, because the workplace has changed a lot, hasn't it? And it keeps changing. It's changed from the Industrial Revolution. And that's what I love about your book, actually, The Unworking. I'm going to give it a plug because I think it's one of those books that you can just keep going back to, dipping into, and you just pick up more little gems, little gobbets of information that just stimulate your brain to think things differently. And you do brilliantly there trace the history of the workplace, and I think as you mentioned at the beginning, biophilic design should be one of the essential keys in sort of the modern workplace. With the advent of the machine and industrialization and the concept of efficiency, I suppose, I think it's screwed a lot of things up related to the workplace. What are your thoughts on like how things have changed to maybe a sort of a bit of an evolutionary path?
Well, it's quite clear that the modern industrial office of the last 150 years has been anti-human and
Yeah.
anti-biophilic. I mean, if you go back to agrarian societies where work was done on the kitchen table in the farmhouse
Mm.
and in the fields, and people went for walks, people were closer to nature, um, um, man's relationship with nature was and work was very different. With industrialization, we came indoors more, we went into the factory, we went into the office,
Mm.
we created an artificial internal environment in which to work. And the idea of technology and process and industrialization was very much about conquering nature and resisting nature and separating nature from how we work. And what we're learning now in the 21st century, um, so, you know, we pushed nature back at the end of the 19th century. We kept it at bay during the 20th century. And now we're beginning to think, well, actually, more natural ways of working, outdoor space, access to natural light and clean air, um, um, closeness to plants and greenery, all of this helps working life. But we're having to kind of put in a superhuman effort to try and bring back something that was naturally part of our existence. There's a certain irony in that.
There is, actually, there is. And also I think that I think one of the major shifts of is really the type of work that we're doing now. You know, it's more which you mentioned in the book again, it's knowledge work. I think we're doing more of that, and it's more of a service industry, I suppose, in some ways. But it really hasn't actually caught up with the design of the workplace, as you say. It's still kind of that industrialization. I mean, I always bang on about these, you know, these open plan workplaces, which are done like, you know, like they're in a factory. So everybody's there and everybody can oversee it and everything else. But we, you know, we need to have a sort of a different kind of format, really. What are your thoughts on the shift of like the type of work and how that should be influencing really the design of the workplace?
Well, work is shifting,
Mm.
but people coming inside and being in artificial environments made a lot of sense when workers were at the lathe.
Yes.
They were standing on the assembly line.
Yeah.
When you had to, as even after the invention of knowledge work, which was invented by the term was invented by Peter Drucker and Fritz Maschlup, two economists working concurrently. They came up with the idea at the same time in about 1960. And but for the next 40 years afterwards, knowledge workers were still having to come into an office which had suspended ceilings and raised floors because copper wires were running through the building. And you had to go to a physical place to access the tools of work. Now, with digitalization, that's when knowledge work really came alive. The digital economy and the digital transformation has meant that you can work anywhere. We can use our tablets and our smartphones and who knows what new devices are coming through with AI now. Um, so, you know, work has been uncoupled from the workplace. So we no longer need to shelter inside, or we no longer need to spend very long hours under artificial light away from any natural source or influence or inspiration. Um, so the rules of engagement have changed, but as you said, workplace design has struggled to catch up. Some companies are beginning to make the necessary adjustments and interventions. But I always say that there's there's a physical and a technical reinvention, but there's also got to be a cultural one as well. There's got to be a cultural revolution around work. I have talked in the past about a work aesthetic reflecting the work ethic, and that we've become conditioned to certain types of environment associated with work and working productively. There's no reason now to have nature deficient environments in which to work. It may have made sense 25 years ago, but technology has moved on, social change is happening. But as I said, there's got to be a cultural transformation and a change in social attitudes around work to go with the physical and technical adaptations to the workplace.
That's very true. I think it's a cultural shift, and that comes from the top as well, doesn't it? Really, the business owners have to also encourage that mentality and understand and have that understanding that they'll get more out of their workforce if they give them a bit more space, a bit more greenery. That it isn't just a fluffy add-on; it's a necessary must-have. Really, this biophilic design.
Absolutely. I mean, in a sense, the rise of hybrid and remote working after the pandemic
Mm.
uh, has been a catalyst for people rethinking what the workplace offer is.
Mm.
So you've got developers now saying, yes, we're going to put in a terrace. Yes, we're going to have a roof garden.
Mm.
Yes, we're going to have outdoor space and we're going to invest in planting and garden design and all of those kinds of things. And we're not going to cut it out as part of a ruthless value engineering the closer we get to finalizing the project.
Mm.
And so developers are beginning to understand what occupiers need.
Mm.
But it is for company, senior management to really take on the idea that you need a more human-centric, biophilic approach. And the sluggishness and the slowness with which people have been willing to return to the office, that is the one of the keys in which company directors can think, well, actually, they're not coming back because they don't want to go back to the old style industrial management office where people are in serried ranks under fluorescent light, in dark, deep spaces. What they want is something different. Sometimes there is confusion. They think what people want is free coffee and pizza and, kind of happy Fridays and all of that kind of thing, enforced joy and fun. When actually they just want a better, healthier work environment.
Yeah, exactly. I think you're right. I like the Landschaft Bureau idea that, you can have a landscaped office. I know that's what Nigel Ozan talks about and stuff in his Workplace Zoo book. But I think it's also what you're alluding to in your book. You talk about network and space and experience and communities. And I think we need different spaces for different tasks. Just like you said, we can't have people in dark, dingy areas. What should a modern office look like? And why, really, for your perspective?
Well, I think we've been through three very distinct and well-defined phases.
Mm.
We went with the invention of the modern office, and that coincided with the invention of the light bulb, the typewriter, the telephone,
Yeah.
the elevator. These were industrial technologies which were kind of concurrent at the end of the 19th century, and that created the age of efficiency. And the machine was the dominant motif, and it was an idea around transplanting the principles of the factory to the principles of the white collar factory, which was the office. So you had a period of efficiency which lingers on, and then there was a period of what we describe in the book as the wave of community. And this is kind of understanding human relations at work, and this is where Bureau Landschaft comes in the 1950s in Germany. And there are similar movements in Scandinavia and Holland. Northern Europe was a very fertile area for a social democratic approach to the office, in which it was all based around relationships. And Bureau Landschaft studied, who was talking to who in the office and arranged desks around that. And they put in plants and they tried to create a much more human environment. And that's where Bureau Landschaft was the moment where biophilia crops up again in the history of the modern office. Then there's a third wave of change from around 2000, and we call that the network. And this is where knowledge work coincides with digital tools and processes, and people can work from anywhere. There's the beginning of flexible work, and a lot of the conditions for the post-pandemic workplace were laid before the pandemic. And then in the book, so we describe the age of efficiency, the age of community, and the age of network. And then we say, well, what's the fourth characteristic? What's the fourth wave? And this is where we are now. And there's a lot of different things going on and a lot of things happening. But quite simply, we're moving away from the office as some kind of dull, inert, industrial container for work, to the idea of workplace encompassing a variety of locations and work styles, and much more aligned to natural rhythms, much more aligned to human health, much more aligned to team dynamics, much more aligned to the potentials of new technologies, the use of data to understand who needs to talk to who and who needs to collaborate. And we're not there yet. We're in a messy period of experiment and trial and error. But where we are with the workplace is moving to something in which biophilic design will have a much higher profile.
I really hope so. I think, like you say, I think things are changing. It is a messy time. I think that's really interesting you say that. That does feel like that. It feels like some people are doing it, some people are not. Some people are not sure what to do. They're getting advice from here, there, and everywhere. And it's just like, it's almost like we just need a blueprint to go, that's what you need to do. And then people take it on board, sort of thing. So, but then again, different nature of different work will need different things in a workspace. So I suppose there isn't a one size fits all, but there should be like an underpinning foundation, which I suppose the biophilic design principles are an underpinning set of principles. So for I think lockdown, I mean, you say there were 4 stages of the things, and in your book as well, you mention, quite rightly, chapter 6 in particular, I noticed, lockdown, COVID, this was a major seismic wake-up call, for work as we know it, what we do, how we do it, and actually why we do it as well. People changed careers, they made different choices. And I think we're seeing that in the legacy of the empty real estate, all these empty offices everywhere, and people trying to repurpose things. And I thought it was really good what you mentioned in here. You say about you call it City 2.0, and how green spaces and health, and people are concerned about air quality and being more sustainable, creating pocket parks and public seating. But there is this paradigm shift, I think, and you explain it incredibly well, which I'm not doing it justice at all. But what would you say from all the research, and all the conversations you have and all you do, are the main shifts? And, I mean, what do you think the future of a workplace is going to be?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be a plurality and a diversity of workplace. If you think about the modern office, they were tended, especially in North America, but also in Europe as well, they tended to be grouped in business parks right in the center of cities, the commercial, central business district or commercial district. They tended to be, a lot of skyscrapers. People commuted in from outlying areas. They didn't tend to live in city centres. They commuted in, which was, hugely from an environmental point of view, very stressful, very resource intensive. People would come in and out at set hours. Motorways and freeways would be chocked with traffic. The public transit systems would be overcrowded at some times and underutilized at others. So it was an economic model that dictated how cities were organized and where people lived in the suburbs. And what's happened now is that with the pandemic, people moved further away or moved into the center of cities. All of that has been mixed up. companies are experimenting with satellite offices, with memberships of co-working spaces. The power and pull of the corporate headquarters in the city centre skyscraper has gone. And equally, kind of out of town science parks, have suffered as well. People want a variety of work experiences, of which the city centre is one of them. But there's a lot happening on suburban high streets in terms of work, work settings, with department stores being turned into co-working spaces, and then redundant office blocks turned into residential. When it just goes to show you how anti-human offices have been over the last 100 years. They're incredibly difficult to convert into habitable living because of the lack of windows and the lack of space, or the deep space that that pushes people away from natural light. So there's a whole kind of major real estate revolution going on in terms of changes of use, and a lot of office stock, as you said, Vanessa, is now redundant. It's very difficult to adapt to the new standards. There's something called the flight to quality that firms are after. They want higher environmental standards in their buildings. They want to meet the certification standards of something like WELL or BREEAM or FitWell, or LEED. There's all these standards in the field that companies feel they need to hit. So what we're seeing is a kind of revolution, and that is all to the good. And once again, we're in this process of change and experiment, but we're going to end up with work strategies rather than a single workspace. And within that strategy, people are going to be able to have some flexibility. I know there's currently a wave of what I call them resolute returners. These are the companies that want everybody back 5 days a week. Amazon, JP Morgan Chase, 10 big employers, they feel their culture has suffered, with hybrid work. They want people back in their workplace. And in the case of JP Morgan Chase, for example, and Amazon and others in this position, they are investing very heavily in workplace design. Much better lighting, linked to circadian rhythms, much better soundscaping and acoustics, more focus on air quality, more focus on outdoor space. Although the new JP Morgan Chase tower is in Midtown Manhattan, so how much space they're going to have? But they have got terraces and so on. So even the resolute returners who want everybody in 5 days a week, they envisage a different environment. And for a lot of companies, hybrid is here to stay. I think 85% of the Fortune 500 companies with publicly declared positions on hybrid have a hybrid policy in their organization. So, it's quite interesting what's going on. I've seen that some firms are using their own offices for away days.
Really?
Yes, Salesforce, rather than the office being the everyday, the office becomes the away day. And Salesforce in California, in San Francisco, they have a Trailfinder Ranch deep in the lush forest, where employees can go to and do team activities. So they are thinking biophilically. It's going to take time, and there are some outliers, but we're in a process of evolution and transformation, and of course the technology around all of this, new location awareness, is changing as well. So we're in for an interesting time, and when you write a book like Unworking, very quickly, we completed it in 2021. we were published in 2022, and of course, within 3 years, the game is moving on very quickly. So maybe we'll do a sequel.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping you're going to write for, because we're revisiting the workplace in the Journal of Biophilic Design
I'll be
next year,
very happy.
2026. So yes, please. I mean, you mentioned in there, I mean, I just to circle back a little bit, you mentioned the economic model dictated, then how cities were designed, and
Yeah,
I think sort of, we're in a with climate change and everything, and an economic model which is outmoded, really. We need to be looking at things differently. And I do like, I mean, you mentioned donut in your book, and you mentioned, but the donut economics, where you're looking at society, you're looking at people, the impact of every decision you make on people and on planet. For me, that's what biophilia is. Every decision we make, is it good for the planet? Do it. If it's not, then don't do it. If it's good for people, do it. If it's not, then don't do it. Kind of sort of simple, really. Do you think, I mean, it's quite sort of, left field question, really, maybe, but do you feel that our economic model is shifting, should shift, has shifted?
yes, I think the economic model is shifting, and there used to be a very, very linear, you have a period of education, and then you have a period of full paid employment,
Mm,
and then you have a period of retirement, you
mm,
know. And, people are engaging in education, they're dipping in and out of education throughout their careers. They're not having a period of, they don't go and work for a bank for 40 years and get a carriage clock. They have a portfolio and they try, people are trying different careers. You and I have morphed back and forth between different fields,
yeah.
you know, and we're not unusual anymore. People are doing that. And then there's no such thing as retirement because we can't, the economic basis of retirement isn't there.
No.
So, you know, um, uh, um, so people are continuing to work. Their engagement with the workplace might be on a more casual or a part-time basis or a consulting basis, but nevertheless, it's not uncommon for people in their 70s to
Mm,
still be engaged with paid work. So
mm,
the economic structures and models that were once very linear and clear cut were also living longer,
mm,
often with trying to manage chronic conditions. So work itself has got to become this much more malleable. You pick it up and put it down and move between sectors and disciplines and roles. And it's inevitable that the places and spaces of work are going to change as well. And as you get older, and I'm very, very interested in all of this, and my involvement with the Royal College of Art and the Helen Hamlyn Centre for Design was very much around design for ageing populations. That was the core focus, particularly with access to work, but also public space and the domestic space.
mm,
Um, we need health, we need healing spaces, we
mm,
need health affirming spaces. Um, we need public environments which support people of different ages and stages and abilities. So,
mm,
um, you know, we're not going to have a single magic bullet in the way that the industrial modern office was seen as the kind of, standard approach. We've left all of that behind. There's
mm,
not going to be a standard template for the future office. What there's going to be is a range of
mm.
different ideas and formulas and formats and settings. Um, and biophilia is going to play a growing role in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's lovely. And for me, biophilia is just that. It's about that morphing. It's about the change. It's about seasonal change, if you want, as well.
Yeah,
Um, but it's responding to the people and life and living systems and living patterns
yeah.
in that localized area, whether that's, in a workplace or in a hospital or in a city or in a school or in a home, that the living systems and how
Yeah.
everything fits together. Um,
I mean, I think what happened with the industrialization of work
mm,
was that work and life were compartmentalized. I mean, there are, social historians in Britain who've talked about the separation of the spheres,
mm,
you know, so the home and the office, work and life. And for the Victorians, of course, the home was a domestic idyll. It was a refuge. It was an
Yeah.
escape from work. The home was biophilia played a role in the home. The bowl of rose petals, and all the rest of it. And in the graphic representation of the era, biophilia was very much part of the home. But you weren't garlanded with flowers in the workplace. That was no way. Um, but now what we're doing is having the reunification of the spheres. Home and workplace are blurred
Yeah.
by hybrid work. Work and life are blurred. People no longer talk about balancing work and life. They talk about blending work and life. And of course, digital technology plays a huge role in that blending, because we're using the same digital tools and platforms to manage our life as well as we manage our work.
Do you have a couple of examples maybe that you can share with us of great workplace design, and then also why you've chosen them? There's so many to choose from, and there's lots. And just as a plug as well, actually, there's stuff in your book in Unworking. It's got some really good examples in there as well. You mentioned about the Google space and that. So please,
I'll talk about two projects
yeah.
which aren't in the book because they're very recent. I mean, they've both been concluded and opened in recent months.
Wow.
But one is GSK have moved, so global life science pharmaceutical company.
Yeah.
They had a massive headquarters in an out of town campus on the Great West Road on the way to Heathrow Airport. And I happen to live locally to there. And it was a big American, glossy American style, corporate campus, miles away from anywhere, miles away from the centre of London. The only people who would be helpful to would be American executives. They don't have to go into London. They just come in from Heathrow, have a meeting, go away again. For the employees, they always struggled with satisfaction and occupancy. Anyway, they gave up the struggle eventually. They've closed it. It's going to be redeveloped as a new urban district of Brentford, which is mixed use. And there's going to be a lot of greenery on there. It's very near the Boston Manor Park. So that's the old site. But the new site, they have moved to a building in New Oxford Street, right in the middle of the West End in London. And for me, that has a number of trends. It's got the buzz, it's got the culture, it's got the theatre land, it's got the libraries, it's got the place where people want to be. But the building itself, and they talk about the science of work, they've followed the science in terms of every single decision in the building. So it's a biophilic building. It has a vertical farm in the basement. They grow their own produce and eat it. But they've made a series of decisions. All staff have sit-stand desks. Everyone has curved screens, and they have the data points to prove all of this. They've staggered their commuting time so people can come in at different times of the day. It's a really interesting facility, a very comprehensive approach, also a comprehensive change management approach. Back to my earlier point about it's not just physical and technical change, it's also cultural transformation. So they created a series of living labs in their old building for the new ways of working. So they created the future environment, and people went in and spent a day in there. So when they got to the new building, it wasn't entirely unfamiliar.
That's good.
So GSK London, New Oxford Street, that's a good example. And a second example is Booking.com in Amsterdam. Booking.com had a series of different sites and spaces and settings around the city, and they brought a disparate groups of employees into one fantastic new building right by the central station. And what I find interesting, again, there's a strong biophilic theme. There are a lot of plants. There's a kind of really lovely central atrium. The way they've managed sound is the number one Well, noise is the number one complaint in offices. The way they've managed the soundscape is amazing. It's also what I would call a socially permeable building. They teamed up with the Refugee Council in the Netherlands, and they have their staff cafe is open to the public, but it's staffed by refugees. So they basically decided at Booking.com, and the head of facilities t- told me that, we're a this is a massive facility for several thousand people. You know, we can't be a large elephant hiding behind a small tree. You know, we have to. We can't. We can't avoid the size of our footprint. So let's do something of social value, and that's why I describe it as a biophilic workplace. So it's working on a number of levels: cultural, social, technical, physical.
Wow, that's brilliant. I like that. That they've, I mean, I suppose it's booking.com. You think that maybe their brains are wired in a different way, they're more kind of outward looking. It's sort of travel, it's kind of, I don't know. Who knows? But
Well,
again, that's
I
cultural.
mean, I'd encourage your readers to have a look at Work Tech Academy,
Yeah.
um, which is www.worktechacademy.com. Um, have a look at our platform because you can access case studies as a member or as a subscriber. And those two case studies are on our site.
Brilliant. Well, definitely go and do that. So, and I'll put the links as well in the spiel that goes with the podcast. So thanks for that, Jeremy. I just want to, just before we get near the end, I want to talk about city design. For me, I always include city design in every single issue, even if it's on healthcare or workplace or whatever it is, or neurodiversity. We always look at city design because I think if we look at that bigger picture, if we look at that sort of the bigger sort of social design of a community, of a space, then I think that filters through in some way, or it addresses certain challenges, and it can have a positive impact on all the different aspects of society. What are your thoughts on urbanism and design?
I'm very interested in the city scale, and as you said earlier,
Mm.
I'm the co-founder of the Healthy City Design International Congress,
Yeah.
which is really designed to bring urban planners, designers, policymakers together with public health professionals. We all know that the built environment is a major determinant of human health.
Mm.
And so, wouldn't it make sense to build health not as an afterthought, not put in a load of hospitals and surgeries just to fix people when they're broken, but actually design streets and waterways and parks and 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 work campuses, design them in such a way that it supports health. So it's more proactive, it's more preventative. Um, so I've always been interested in that subject.
Fantastic. So that's why you set up really the healthy city design.
Yeah, we set it up in 2017. It
Mm.
ran for a number of years in London, um, at the Royal College of Physicians, the wonderful Dennis Lasdon building in Regent's Park. Fantastic setting, actually, because wonderful, wonderful place to be. Um, the last few years, we've taken it on the road. We've done 2 years in Liverpool, which has got a lot of aspirations to be a healthier city, has huge health inequalities
Mhm.
from the south of the city to the north. And Liverpool actually, you know, it's got the River Mersey, so it's got a lot of blue space, but it hasn't got a lot of green space in the city centre. So they're doing all kinds of very interesting things. Um, so it was in Liverpool for 2 years, and now it's going to Salford in Greater Manchester to the Lowry, which is a building which is itself is a symbol of regeneration on Salford Docks,
Mm.
it was the original dirty old town, you know. But they've cleaned up the waterway. They've done huge amount of regeneration, you know. A very deprived area, but they've got a whole kind of health strategy around that. So
Mm.
we're in Salford in October, and do check that out because it's going to be a fantastic congress. And
Yeah.
again, biophilic principles are very much part of it. We've got strands such as work and workplace, transport and mobility, homes and neighbourhoods, urban regeneration and planning, and so on.
Mm.
Um, and we know we're attracting people from all over the world.
Yeah, I actually attended the one I spoke at the one of the ones in last year in Liverpool, and I can attest to it being really inspiring, really great, some really fantastic thought leaders and researchers and people who are really practical doing stuff, as well as policymakers and everything. So yeah, it's definitely one if people are interested in that to go up and have a look. I mean, do you have any examples of any great healthy city design that you'd like to see emulated somewhere else?
Well, I think for me, one of the most important concepts in healthy city design is the idea of the 15-minute city, which has
Yeah.
been much misunderstood and much maligned, especially in this country where libertarians and right-wing groups have jumped on it as they've jumped on traffic calming
Yeah.
measures as some kind of draconian threat to civil liberties. And it's been much misunderstood, but the original concept was by Carlos Moreno, who's based at in Paris. He's an academic, Colombian French academic, and the Paris mayor has taken on some of the 15-minute city principles. Melbourne as well, and a number of cities around the world are doing it. And this idea that you should be able to walk or cycle to get most of the main functions in life. So that is culture, education, food, work. And once you begin to think along those lines, you can interpret it in all kinds of different ways. And some cities have stretched it to the 20-minute city. That's fine. But the idea of, if you look at the World Health Organization, if you look at the idea of the compact city, going away from the model I described earlier, the 20th century model of the long commute from the satellite town or the suburb into the office stack, the central business district with all the office towers in the centre. Get away from that, and have a series of clusters which are compact, and people are moving around, staying fit by walking and cycling, and less reliance on car use, less formulaic commuting, much more local food systems and food produce, and escaping these food deserts where, a lot of cities have food deserts where, the high street is dominated by betting shops and fried chicken outlets and pawnbrokers, and you can't buy a tomato.
Mhm.
So food is very much a big part of the compact city.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing new concepts, and London is doing a lot of this, especially South London.
Yeah.
And there are various groups doing what was known as impact investment to try and stimulate some of these urban concepts, and that will ultimately create healthier cities.
Mm. Absolutely. And especially if the planning laws and planning, divisions and because I speak to quite a few planners and they say that their hands are tied. They can't do things. They've got this kind of like they would love to have more green. They would love to have more, walkable distances and all that kind of thing. But because their boxes they've got to tick are so tight, you know.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of countries, zoning.
Yeah.
We've got very difficult planning um, regulations in this country, and various governments have tried to kind of unpick them and reorganize them, and um, the zoning between living and working and light industrial and heavy industrial and
Mm.
um, um, work itself is changing. So I think the zoning laws, they're doing that in the States actually. In New
Mm.
York, they're trying to regenerate by addressing the zoning laws, but it's a complex subject.
Yeah. That's interesting. I need to look at that zoning laws. So if I can see if I can influence somebody somewhere.
Well, I mean, if you look, the green belt in this
Yeah.
country, on one hand, you might say, well, we must protect the green belt at
Mm.
all. at all costs and protect nature at all costs. So we need to fill in brownfield sites and all of that. But
Mm.
if that comes at the expense that you can't put a green space in a brownfield site,
Mm.
and then
Yeah.
who's having access to nature when and how?
Yeah.
It's a social equity thing.
It is. That's it.
So
Yeah.
it's very complex.
Yeah. Exactly. We
But,
did address that in the.
but the Congress is not afraid of addressing these complexities. You know, um,
Yeah.
it's like a Rubik's cube trying to put all these things together.
Yeah, exactly. What do you hope, the conference will bring about? Do you find it filters through into decisions that are made elsewhere? Do you have any
Well,
feedback on that?
inevitably, we have a lot of supply side
Yeah.
thinking. We have a lot of architects and designers attend. We have a lot of researchers, who are investigating new concepts. We're trying to engage more with the developer community and the investor community. With some success, I have to say, we've got
Mhm.
more involvement. And what we've found, in order to do that, you can't really do that generically, but you can go to a city like Salford, which is relatively geographically bounded, and then you can identify local players and they can come into a debate. So we think taking the Congress to different cities, and we might, take it, to other British cities, or we might take it to European cities. They might be willing to host. Um, it just depends. But what we're trying to do is 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 to reconnect something that industrialization broke. So if you go back to the golden age of Victorian city building,
Mm.
you know, public health was the number one issue in how cities got built.
Mhm.
The sewers were put in, the slums were cleared,
Yeah.
you know, um, uh, people were given access to water.
Mm.
Public health was the number one factor in in um, in planning cities, and so urban designers and public health people worked together hand in glove.
Mm.
Somewhere along the line, it got severed, and public health ceased to be the number one criteria for when you're planning new cities or new city districts or
Mm.
urban developments. So what we're trying to do is reconnect something that was there originally but got
Mm.
broke.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're doing a great job, and yeah, the I just want to talk about the Healthy City Design Awards that you say are open now, and the closing date's on the 4th of September. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about those and maybe what you're hoping to see from entries?
Yeah, so one, it's a way of showcasing practice, basically, to say, yes, we know the theories, we know the academic research, we know the principles on which a healthier city could be based, and some of those principles are biophilic. Um, but what we're looking for is really good examples. So there are 8 categories. Um, you won't be surprised that I'm chairing the panel on healthy workplaces. There's also panels on healthy homes, regenerative design for the public realm, healthy placemaking for community impact, social infrastructure, design research, uh, healthy transport and mobility, and finally, healthy city planning and design. So there are 8 categories. It's very the task of entering is not onerous. It's
Mm.
very easy, and you get the chance to um, showcase your work at the Healthy City Design Congress and get a big international audience. Last year we had some fabulous winners.
Yeah, yeah, they're brilliant. I looked at some of them because obviously they were on display there and stuff, and just so inspiring. Before I ask you the final magic question, Jeremy, is there anything else you'd like to add at this point?
No, I think we've covered off. We've I think we've covered off the evolution of the workplace and how we're really um, trying to reconnect the natural world with the working world, and I have some optimism in that area.
Fantastic. Well then, so the final magic question then, I ask everybody who comes on the podcast, if you could paint the world with a magic brush of biophilia, what would it look like?
Well, I think the world with the magic brush of biophilia would obviously look a lot greener. But I'm going to give you a very concrete example of what I would like to see happening. There was a wonderful paper at the Healthy City Design Congress given a couple of years ago by an American urban designer, and he'd been working on traffic calming measures in certain main streets in small towns in America. And what he'd been doing is not bringing in, you know, low traffic neighborhoods. They hadn't used legislation. They had, and this is the magic brush of biophilia, they had used physical traffic calming. So say there were 4 lanes with a central reservation. They took out 2 of the lanes, one on each side, and created a massive verge of vegetation, flowers, planting, trees, and they did it in different. He did it in different ways in different in small towns, and basically, what it did was he found that drivers were slowing down, looking at the shops on either side, with this wonderful spear of this snake of biophilia down the centre of the road. It was a natural traffic calming. It was very good economically because people slowed and meandered and stopped and shopped locally. They didn't just go down a 4-lane highway. And that's what the magic brush of biophilia would look like for me. Far more vegetation in the middle of arterial and trunk roads to slow the traffic and create a more humane environment.
Thank you for listening to the Journal of Biophilic Design podcast.